We all just saw David Benavidez go out there and put on a dominating performance against Demetrius Andrade. He dropped him in the 4th round, and then he beat the brakes off him for another 2 rounds before his corner called it quits after the 6th. I mean, after that round, the ref came over there. He said, I can't let you take another round like that. I can't go out there and see another round like that. I'm going to have to stop it.
Guys, I'm not going to watch that again, all right?
We all just witnessed that. And yet, right after that fight, we heard Demetrius Andrade jump on the mic and say, he's not the better fighter than me. He's just the bigger man.
Listen, it's not that he's a greater, skillful fighter than me. I'm moving up to the 3rd division. This is my 3rd division, trying to be world champion. I came to fight the bigger man.
How could that be the case? How could we be talking about a situation when we all just saw what we saw, and yet this man says that he's the better fighter? I mean, look, let's step back for a minute and think about this for a second, right? I mean, on the one hand, are we talking about a situation where we're just talking about a guy who got stopped? We're just talking about a guy who took a pretty solid pounding. Is this a situation where he's not exactly thinking very clearly? Right? He's just coming out there. He's emotional. He just got beat up. He's just saying some things. I mean, he's a highly skilled fighter in his own right. But is this that type of a scenario? I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that we heard a guy say something that didn't exactly make sense jumping on the mic right after a performance like that. I mean, it could be a little bit of that, right? I wouldn't discount that for a second. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I think there's something a little bit more to it, right? If I'm being perfectly honest, I think there's a little bit more to what he's saying. And I think that can be found in those first 2.5 rounds. When we sit down and we look at those first 2.5 rounds, if we're being perfectly honest with each other, man, Demetrius Andrade was seeing a lot of success out there. I mean, he was doing everything he wanted. I mean, think about this. All training camp, the type of things that he's working on, when he's studying film, when he's working with his trainers, when he's breaking things down, when he's imagining where he's going to see success, that's exactly what those first 2.5 rounds look like. He was moving around incredibly well. He was keeping the distance he wanted. He was working strong behind the jab. And in the 2nd round, he was starting to work in combinations. He was landing solid shots. He was turning Benavidez constantly. I mean, David Benavidez was not cutting off the ring at all. I mean, when you look back at those first 2 rounds, all he was doing was following Demetrius Andrade around that ring. Demetrius Andrade, he was playing the matador. He was constantly walking Benavidez into what he wanted. And when the opening bell rang for that 2nd round is when he started to get more aggressive. I mean, I got to imagine after that, he was feeling incredibly confident, man. He was feeling in control of things. And then all of a sudden we got to the 1 minute left in the 3rd round. 1 minute left in the 3rd round, and all of a sudden everything changes. Right? That's when David Benavidez is able to catch up with him. That's when he's able to start making connections. That's when his jab starts landing. That's when his lead right hand starts landing. That's when all of a sudden, instead of just being turned all the time and constantly following Andrade around the ring, that's when he's able to start landing some shots. He's going to the body with both hands. And then in the 4th round, he lands a beautiful right hand. Hurts Andrade, right? We can see his eyes rolling in his head. Hurts him, drops him, beats him up for another 2 rounds, gets him out of there. Right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that Demetrius Andrade's a better fighter, right? It's pretty obvious to me who the better fighter is. We just saw the 2 men get in the ring and fight. 1 man came out the winner. That man's the better fighter. Okay, this wasn't a scenario where David Benavidez was losing that fight for 5.5 rounds. He was losing significantly. Everybody knew it was going to happen, and all of a sudden he gets lucky, gets this huge punch, appears to come out of nowhere, and gets the victory. That wasn't the case at all. This was a clear-cut victory for David Benavidez. So like I said, this isn't a situation where I'm suggesting something crazy after watching the fight and trying to read into some scenario where we're trying to pull out and extrapolate that somehow, some way, in some universe, Demetrius Andrade is a better fighter. I'm not saying that. But what I do think this brings a situation up, and what we should be questioning ourselves about, is how do we grade fighters? What exactly is it that makes a better fighter? Is it a guy who's able to go out there and move around better technically? He's able to keep the distance better when you're fresh. He looks prettier when he does things. His punches are a little bit more sharp and crisp. He's able to shoot combinations at distance better. He's right, like more of what we call a technical boxer or a classic boxer. If a guy is able to do that, do we think about that as a better fighter than somebody who's maybe going in there and ugly and brawling? I mean, David Benavidez is never going to make it down to 147 pounds, yet we know that that's where Demetrius Andrade turned pro. Obviously, he was the smaller man, but yet he chose to move up in weight because he wanted to challenge the bigger man to try to add another world championship to his resume. I mean, look, there's a reason when we talk about all-time greats, almost one of the things that they have to do is compete in these multiple weight classes and dominate. It's because it's so difficult. It's because weight classes are there for a reason, right? It's because we know that being a bigger man makes a difference. But does that necessarily make him a better fighter? Right? What is it? Because when David Benavidez went out there and started dominating with a minute left in the third round, it wasn't just because he was bigger. It wasn't just because he was stronger. It wasn't just because he weighed more. The man has an incredibly high skill level himself, but it wasn't necessarily as pretty. Are we suggesting that he wouldn't have been able to do those things if he wasn't bigger? He wouldn't have been able to do those things if he wasn't stronger. These are interesting questions that we got to think about when we talk about this. When we talk about what's going to make a better fighter. What are the things that we truly value? How far are we willing to take this? I'm a better fighter, but the other man was more conditioned. I won 10 out of the 12 rounds, and in the 11th round, he stopped me because my gas tank was empty. I was the better fighter, but he was more conditioned. I was the better fighter, but he was stronger. Right? Think about when people used to talk about Deontay Wilder. They would say, I'm the better fighter, but this guy's got a crazy punch. I'm able to go out there, Luis Ortiz, in the rematch. He's able to go out there and win the majority of the first 6 rounds, 7 rounds, whatever it was, until all of a sudden Deontay Wilder uncorks that right hand, and it's like a shotgun going off, drops him, end of the fight. I'm a better fighter, but this guy's the heavier puncher. Does that really make you the better fighter? We know how these fights are contested. They're contested in weight classes. They're contested over 12 rounds. If we're talking about a world championship fight, you have to go out there and you have to perform for the duration of that fight, right? We know what the rule set is. Here's the rules. Here's how long the competition is. Here's how things are done. It's a 20-foot ring, 22-foot ring, whatever the case may be. Everybody agrees to everything, and then we go out there and do it. And if you lose that competition for whatever reason, multiple reasons, maybe you weren't as strong, you weren't as fast, you didn't have as good of a jab, you didn't have as good of a chin, all of those reasons are the reasons you lost. Or maybe it's only one reason. At what point do we say you're the better fighter or you are not the better fighter? I mean, if two guys go in there and fight, it would seem pretty clear. When these two men fight, one person comes out the winner, it seems pretty clear that he's the better fighter. But what if we're talking about people in different weight classes? Typically I would look and say it's how they dominate amongst their competition. But it brings up an interesting thought. What kind of criteria are we going to use when we're talking about who's the better fighter? And when we're talking about two guys going in there and fighting each other, and we're talking about almost a tale of two fights, where early in the fight it'll look like one guy's winning decisively, later in the fight another guy's winning decisively, and they're winning in different ways. Right? One guy's winning on the outside using the jab, boxing beautifully, maybe using some slick counter punching, and another guy's able to all of a sudden land a big punch and then come in and bully a guy, win on the inside, use a lot of body work, fight on the ropes, things like that. Right, two completely different styles. Are we going to say that one is better than the other? Are we going to say that one is, prettier? Or are we going to say that one is more effective? We're going to say that one was only effective because. Let me know what you guys think.